to get outside, get some sunlight on you. I say that as I go below the hill. Get some sunlight on you and see beautiful rivers. I can hear the trickle of the stream. It does things to you. Good things, you know, because now you're in your natural environment. The TV is not your natural environment. You know that, right? The internet is not the natural human environment. It's a playground that we created. It's a way to access goods and services and information, and it can be used very effectively as a tool. But it also has the ability to draw us away from our dear friends all around us, you know, the ones that don't speak so loudly, but have the ability to hug us back. If you take the time, you know, if you're the kind of person or you become the kind of person who's willing to stop your busy schedule to hug a tree, to smell a flower, to notice the little tiny things, the beauty that is all around us in the natural world. How long has this forest been here? You know, forever. This forest was here so long ago that, you know, humans weren't even around. Even before the Native Americans were here, this forest was here. Right? And I find there's something very consoling, inviting and connecting, to realize how sustainable this world is, how sustainable the natural environment is. And we are affecting it. There's no doubt that human beings have had, call it an effect, whether you want to call it positive or negative, that's, you know, that's your thoughts. But it does have a resilience to it. It does have a boldness to its intention to live, you know, to continue, to adapt and find harmony with its environment, with the other living things all around it. So we can take that as an example of what we can be. So this river obviously changes in height on a regular basis, and when it's rainy, it can get pretty moist. You know, you can get a lot more space between the rocks as you cross the river, right? And so I put in a rope so that you guys can balance yourselves, because so far all the skydivers I've brought here have fallen in right there crossing the river. So I made it a little bit easier for you. It's interesting how people that are such amazing athletes will sometimes just rush, you know, just rush a little bit and then get wet foot. Here's something. I love this tree. So the plan is we're gonna put some little, you know, little chairs, little table, make a little fairy home in there. So if you have stuff like that, or you've made stuff like that, when you come and visit, bring it so we can put it out here. Look at that. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? I love this time of year, you know, because I still need a hat and sweater today, but I'm not cold. It won't be long before I don't need it. I'm going to get warmer as I hike. And I think that's true of many things in life, where you get started on some sort of a journey and it's hard at the beginning. There's a lot of work to be done in preparation. And then when you get started, it's kind of a struggle. I know my first run of the day skiing, my feet always hurt. You know, you can spend $1,000 on ski boots and they still hurt the first few runs. It's you, not the boots, right? And I think that it's important to recognize that and see that it's part of the process. You know, that when there's a change of venue, change of circumstances, there will be resistance. And you're going to have to gently and gracefully push against that resistance so that you can get to where things kind of smooth out a little bit. But there has to be an acceptance of the fact that life has what the ego calls suffering, but maybe the larger mind could label something more like resistance. You know, it's a little bit harder to swim up a river. And sometimes things are like that, and sometimes you realize you're swimming up a river that you created, you know, that you, with your judgments, for instance, like who you think should hold the highest office in the land. Some of you are celebrating right now, and some of you are just dumbfoundedly depressed. Just consider the possibility, gently, that maybe you don't know everything. I think it's important to have grace. You know, grace is I've said it many times, it's a technology, it's a mental ability that we can cultivate where we zoom out a little bit, up away from the battleground, out of our certainty, out of our judgment, and just say, well, I don't really know. I don't really know that I have to fix the whole world in every way. I don't know that everything's broken. Apply that to everything so that you can soften your convictions enough to get a little relief. Relief from the battle inside of you. We think of the battle as being outside of us, you know. It's in Washington. It's bigger than me, you know. But a collective mindset is actually a whole bunch of separate mindsets in their own tooling around, their own spinning, drawing conclusions, grabbing hold of their certainty, and then, you know, pulling out their swords and charging into battle. Wisdom affords us the freedom to not be so certain, to not pretend we're all-knowing, any of us, about even the most fundamental things about your existence. Are you so sure that this body is what you are? Or is it just what you're in? Are you so sure that a tree that falls down is a devastating event for the forest? Worms don't think so. The fungus doesn't think so. The soil doesn't think so. So there will be many things that fall, many things that rise for a time, and they fall too. All of it comes and goes, but what doesn't change is that we are an observer of what is occurring. And we are the ones who decide what we believe. We make our judgments about what is true and what isn't. And when we release those a little bit, we do step aside enough to expand our view, expand our window to wisdom so that we can be more understanding. That is what we need now, is it not? To reach for understanding. If our goal is not to be at war within our own hearts and with our friends and neighbors who might stand on the other side of some fence, politically or philosophically, to reach for understanding with a compassionate intention. That's a next level skill is what that is. The way I see it now, there's always three of us. Three mindsets with which we view our circumstances. One is your sense of self based on your experiences and what you clarified to yourself through those experiences is your virtues. Right? What you believe in, what you feel to be true. And then we have this other layer of self, which is a little more collective, which is our society's mores and norms and the assumptions made by our society. And that can create feelings too. Right? People get enraged or enamored with things and people based on this collective perspective. And when the collective mindset has become less sane, less loving, less caring, less egalitarian, well, it's time to look to the self to discern what you truly believe. And then we have a third aspect of the self, which transcends the ego mind, which is preoccupied with the fear of dying, judgment, separation. Because it needs all that stuff to define itself as real. And then you have this collective trip, which is human society and what normal people think. And you can hear those as voices in your head, you know. You might even find yourself arguing for those opinions when you may or may not, in retrospect, agree what you were defending. So, above those, interconnecting on a much larger collective level, there is the oneness. So, for example, I can feel like some guy walking down a trail in a forest, or I can think of myself as a part of the forest walking through itself. That this plant is part of me. Well, it is. The air that I breathe in was created by that plant. The soil underneath my feet is creating the food that I eat. The gravity of the planet is keeping me from flying off into space where I don't have any of that stuff. So if we zoom out into an identification with the collective consciousness of life forms in all the myriad ways in which life finds its way, then there's this selfishness that just kind of dissolves. You know, the drama and the story starts to soften. And we allow in a little bit more peace of mind, peace within mind, which is our natural way of being. It's what we really are. It's just running the wrong software. The software of the ego and the collective ego. But what if we were to identify deliberately on a regular basis with the all that is? What if there was a channel within our mind where we see through the eyes of the world. Everybody's capable of that perspective if we zoom out. Of course, we got a death grip on the truth, I am this. But it's only one level of truth. Some call a level teaching. You can talk about the human experience and it is absolutely real. You twist your ankle, that's real. Cosmic consciousness will make you feel better emotionally, but not physically. It's still going to hurt. So I think it's important for us to recognize these three channels of our experience, all valid, all just kind of different frequencies of focus and depth and breadth of our awareness. But when we see and identify as the universe itself, the all that is, we realize that we are a part of that as an ego. We are part of that as a society, as a planet. We are part of that as an ecosystem. It's not separate. We just think of ourselves as separate because we tend to come down like an airplane landing and you can only see the runway. When in fact, the runway is part of the sky. It's just the bottom part of the sky. That's what we are. And sometimes the bottom part of the sky is quite beautiful. Look at that. Wow. One of my favorite little trees that has resurrected itself from death. And what I call trout rock. Although the last time we were here, all we caught was bass. Pretty good, right? So when you come to a place like this, where you can sit down, become silent, allow for the peace of mind to gently flow back in. It takes time. The identification with the ego self and with the cultural self starts to soften, and we can then zoom up and out and be the universe observing itself. Being the universe seems a little lofty as an objective for identification of your point of awareness as being all points. And for many people, I think it's bordering on too much, because our society has nothing to do with that. That's not fully sane for most people, right? In their identification of what sanity is. And yet, sanity, in the Western sense, has not led us to be quite as happy, grounded, and peaceful as we need to be. There's a reason why people slip into depression, even though they've got the fancy car and the money. Even though they've got the relationships all dialed in and the career, there's still a place where many of us come to where it's still just not enough. This is where the wider perspective comes in. And it doesn't come in from the busy mind. It doesn't come in from the logical mind. It doesn't come in from the money. Or enough skydives or enough miles behind you on the trail. It comes from silence. It comes from emptying the mind of its content to see that it was always full. And that fullness was being displaced by the lower content of the ego mind. The cravings, the desires, the helplessness, the fury, human drama. And I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just being human, but once in a while, being human's not enough. Not enough to fill that apparent void in our souls that leads us to a craving. And that craving can lead to a wondering. And if that wondering is done maybe in a place like this, and your mind wonders about what is immediately here, the surroundings, the living beings that are all around you, the ebb and flow of a balanced ecosystem, that becomes a pattern within the mind, as opposed to the chaotic human world, which leads to more inner chaos. But even when we fall in love with the natural world again, even when we empty our minds of the human content and the personal experience, the personality, the story, and we zoom out into an observance of the natural world, and we kind of dig into that very good feeling, even then, it's just the world. It's not the infinite ether. There's more. There's a deeper level of beauty of the universe that is, as we say, the silence between the notes. The beingness and consciousness that is in between the matter. And this is what we can attain a connection to when we sit in silence. When we stop fidgeting and filling the space. When we stop covering up our suffering with our addictions. All the different kinds of addictions of alcohol and entertainment and sex, drugs, and rock and roll. When you put that whole thing down, and you just be in the natural world, grounding your energy. I mean, I'm sitting on a boulder right now, right? Think, electrically, what's happening here? I'm grounded. Maybe you take off your shoes. I'm a fan. I do it a lot. I don't often wear shoes in the greenhouse, I can now be in proximity, a launching place, where I can expand my mind into the infinity, into the larger consciousness that permeates everything. And then I find solace, true sustainable peace. It's not because of the world that I find peace. It's because I'm remembering that that's what I am. Do you remember the peace that you are? Do you know your inseparable connection to all that is? Do you know your significance? Your importance as you break new ground in the universe and push back the walls of possibility by doing, by wondering, efforting, and then experiencing. To live a path that nobody's ever lived before. Nobody's ever walked in your shoes exactly the way you walk in them. Which means that the supercomputer that the universe can be compared to is learning through you. And the part that becomes very interesting is that when a human being observes the experience as something that they learned from without a positive or negative judgment about it. And then they let it go and they expand further outward into the infinity that is consciousness. Your ability to know and your access to guidance, wisdom, knowledge opens up. The human brain is like a tiny little USB drive. You plug and play, and you're doing what you do from your perspective of your upbringing, and the guidance from your culture and your own inner guidance. But that inner guidance is a much deeper well than we realize. That inner guidance that helps you to avoid accidents and seize opportunities at the moment that they're presented. Your knowing of truth, it requires a quiet mind. If we silence ourselves so that we can hear our capital S self, which is, from my perspective, a collective. It's a collective of your larger being. Now, from a certain perspective, that is all the shoes you've walked in, all the personality experiences that you've had throughout your being. However, that is one channel, one cosmos, really. It's like a constellation of all that you are. Massive. Dumbfoundingly massive. And yet tiny in comparison to the larger is. The larger truth of what it all is. That's the Akash that we have access to, but only when we're in silence. Only when we're at peace. Only when we're listening for the sounds that are softer, Might be literal, mostly metaphorical. Ideas in your mind that don't scream and yell. They don't attack and defend. It's a gentle, loving hand. That's how you know it's the guidance that comes from, call it the good place. We have it within us. And when we feel lost, this is when we have to remember that exists. Because when we get our panties in a bunchy, when we get all freaked out about politics and storms and people losing their lives and their homes, there's so much happening as catalysts for our growth. It's very easy to be so certain that it's all wrong, that it wasn't supposed to happen like this. Well, when you are thinking that way, that's when you're outside of the cosmic consciousness that you're wanting, because you're losing access to the bigger perspective. To have a gentler hand in the way that you touch the world. Touch it with a little less certainty. In the inner knowing, this is all for our benefit. Things don't happen to us, they happen for us. As an alchemical catalyst for our growth. And if you boil it all down, all things are either a demonstration of love or a call for love. And this is our school. Each one of us. To transcend judgment and ego. To put down our swords and stop attacking. Our sledgehammers of judgment can be put away. And you will need to discern. You might even need to move. You might need to change careers and partners and different things, because finally, after a significant amount of time of sitting in silence and listening to the soft, small voice, you realize that, yeah, your old life is over and now there's a new one beginning. If you struggle against it, it's going to hurt, you know. But many of the things that are happening are very much like a woman having birth. If you didn't know anything about the birthing process on planet Earth, and you walked in while a lady's having a baby, you'd be like, oh my God, she's dying, right? All the screaming and the blood and the, right? It seems like suffering, and that's our world right now. We are birthing a new world. We are birthing a new perspective on the world. One that is more heart-centered, more kindness-centered. And there is a genius to kindness. There is a genius to compassion. And I understand some people are in the midst of some pretty heavy stuff, and you can't walk away. You have to deal with it. The question is, are you making it worse? Are you making peace? Are you bringing in healing and helping? Or are you just trying to get revenge? Because that never-ending cycle has been around too long, and it got us to this place where it got bad enough to change. Time to take the leap. It's time to take the leap into a different mindset, and that is what will be. I mean, I understand some people are not going to go for it, you know. They're not going to take the leap into a loving way. Some of them will stay, as they say, miserable bastards. And that's fine for them. Keep your distance, right? Some people just will self-destruct based on their mindset because they're not an open system. Because they're so certain in their judgment of what is true and what is not true, their mind has become closed. Keep the cellular membrane of your mind semi-permeable. Allow new ideas to come and go, and use your discernment as to what you dig and what you don't. And as you explore the internet, rather than looking for things that excite you just for the sake of excitement, look for things that inspire you. Look for words and ideas that open your mind, because there's a lot out there, more than ever before. And if you just, without judging, observe, listen, and see what resonates, what you feel is true, what is in sort of a parallel oscillation to your pattern of being, something that feels harmonious, and see how far that goes. Because most of the time when you walk past the garden, you see tomatoes and go, it's a tomato garden, until you go closer. And then you see behind the tomatoes, look at those radishes. I didn't know that was there. I didn't know there was broccoli behind the radishes. There is so much to do. And if we put on our attitude of, wow, this is going to be fun and exciting, it's going to be one hell of a wonderful ride. There's alternatives to that perspective, but I don't recommend it. I hope your day is blessed with your own investment in the expansion of your mind, to be here in your moment, in the way that is new and different and refreshing. I hope that you find peace in your day, and that peace leads you to make one good decision after the other.